Hello everyone, I am the storyteller, and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from? And what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. Heirloom 2, the fuel, 1 to 1. Well, hellfire and biscuits, you done stumbled into a mess bigger than a hog in a mud pit. Let me break it down for you real slow like, because Lord knows it took me a while to figure it out my own self. See, I was just minding my business, drinking my sweet tea, scratching my belly, thinking life was about as normal as hunting deer on a Sunday. But nope, turns out I was. About 3 kinds of stupid. Ever hear folks talk about not messing with things you don't understand? Preacher always said, don't go worshiping false idols. But did I listen? Course not. Now I got a one-way ticket to hell in a hay cart, and I ain't even got a damn refund. I'm talking real hell, y'all. Not that fancy fire and brimstone kind of deal where you just sit around, sweating all day. Nah, this is different. This is the heirloom, and it don't just eat your soul. It chews it up, spits it out, and asks for seconds. And guess who's on the menu? Me. Also my daddy, also my granddaddy. Also my girlfriend, Alina. Also Sylvester, my childhood cat, bless his dumb little heart, ran out in front of a truck like he had somewhere important to be. Now I know you're sitting there scratching your head wondering, what in the high-fried Kentucky fried chicken is this boy talking about? Well, buckle up, Buttercup. We're fixing to take a ride. Assistant 2 semicolons. Now let me tell you about Jeffrey. Boy wasn't right. In the head, bless his heart, he had this thing in his basement. Not a still, not an old truck engine, not even a possum he was keeping as a pet, don't ask. This thing was alive, sorta humming, sorta calling to him like a siren whispering through a cornfield. Any regular old fella with an ounce of sense would have burned the whole house down and moved to a new county. But Jeffrey? No. He had that special kind of stupid, the one that makes a man touch a fence he knows is electric, just to be sure. So, what's he do? He let his girl Alina that flips the switch. Y'all ever seen something so bad, so wrong, it makes your stomach go colder than a frog's ass in a snowstorm? That's what happened. Alina screamed. Something inside that heirloom snapped to life, and it took hold of us. No running, no hiding. The only way out? Suicide. And Jeffrey? Well, he ain't no coward, but he ain't got much left to lose neither. That's why he grabbed them truck keys, sat his ass in the driver's seat, and let her rip. 10 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour, 60 miles per hour. That good old Chevy was flying down the road like a bat out of a possum's backside. 100 miles per hour. No slowing down now, buddy. Then whoosh. That truck done lifted off the road. Ain't never seen nothing move so smooth. For a split second, Jeffrey was free. S-P-L-A-S-H. Water comes crashing in like a drunk uncle at a wedding. Floop, bloop, floop. Cab fills up faster than a beer cooler at a tailgate. Party. Jeffrey's last words. Alina, I did love you. Lord, please look after Sylvester. And nothing. 3 that y'all still with me? Good. Grab a beer, swat a mosquito, and lean in close, because things are about to get weirder than a 3-legged possum dancing on a hot tin roof. Jeffrey's eyes shot open. First thing he saw, Alina's smile. Bright, warm. Like Sunday morning biscuits fresh out of Granny's oven. For half a second, everything felt all right. Then it came the screech. Not just any old noise. This was something unnatural, like if a barn owl and a chainsaw had a demon baby and raised it on a diet of shattered dreams. The beasts were outside. Jeffrey bolted upright. What in the deep-fried hell is going on? His daddy stepped forward, arms crossed, looking like he just chewed up some bad tobacco. Best we can tell, son, Daddy grumbled. We're inside the machine. Jeffrey's stomach turned colder than an outhouse seat in December. Wait, Dad? Is that really you? Daddy just sighed, like he'd been waiting on this. Conversation longer than he cared to admit. Yep, all of us are here. Paw, your great paw, even your mama. Now that was enough to make a groan. Man forget how to breathe. 4. Mom? Jeffrey's voice cracked like a shotgun. Blast over an empty field. Yeah, she's here, son, Daddy said, but his eyes got all heavy like a man holding a secret too big for his britches. But she ain't doing so good. Machines damn near sucked her dry. That hit Jeffrey like a steel-toed boot to the gut. He needed to see her. So he followed Daddy down the path. Alina's, hand in his, clammy as a frog's belly in a rainstorm. He wasn't sure who was shaken more, him or her. Jeffrey, he heard it, his mama's voice. He broke into a run, feet slamming against the ground, breath coming fast. When he saw her, his heart near about quit. Mom! He lunged, damn near tackled her, clinging like a kid who just realized the dark's got. Claws. Mama, I missed you. But the screeching outside, it was getting closer. Real close. Daddy put a hand on Jeffrey's shoulder, voice tight. Son, now ain't the time. 5. Listen to your father, Mama said, voice weaker than a one-legged rooster in a dogfight. He knows this place. The only way out is the mountain. That got Jeffrey's attention. Mountain? Daddy nodded. It's surrounded by creatures. Jeffrey's stomach twisted up something awful. What the hell kind of creatures? Mama sighed, looking more tired than a hound. Dog after a coon hunt. Your father will explain, but I won't be there. No, Mom, don't start talking like that. She put a hand on his cheek, soft as the lullabies she used to sing. I got no fight left, baby. I'll become one of them, soon. Jeffrey felt her slip away. 1 second she was. There. The next. Nothing but her clothes in his arms. He staggered back, shaken, heart hammering, looking at Daddy like a man staring down a storm. He can't stop. Dad, where is she? 6. Daddy looked at Jeffrey, face all serious like a preacher about to lay down some hard truth. She's one of them now, son. Jeffrey's gut sunk like a stone in a swamp. Dad, why? Daddy just shook his head. I don't know, boy. His voice was tight, like he was holding back, words he couldn't afford to say. And that's when the screeching outside got worse. All right, now hold up. I know what y'all are thinking. You're sitting there gnawing your nails, whispering what in the redneck revenant? Hell is happening now. Well, buckle up, because things are about to blow the hell up. Jeffrey whipped around. Where's the mountain? Daddy pointed. Only place in this world that's got any color. Jeffrey blinked. Color? Darkness hates color, son, Daddy said, real, slow-like. It only tolerates what it controls. Jeffrey sat down hard, stomach churning like bad. Moonshine. He looked at his arm, bloated from the drowning, purple and ugly as sin. And then he saw it. Everyone in this place. They were disfigured, changed by how they died. Suicide left a mark, a cruel, sick signature. 7. Jeffrey turned to Alina. For a second, just a second, she looked perfect, like she did back before all this hellfire. Nonsense. He looked again. Bones, sticking out, sharp and ugly, from when? She wandered into the snow. He sucked in a breath, stomach doing. Cartwheels. He caught his own reflection in a puddle. Oh my God, Jeffrey gagged. I look like marshmallow. Alina laughed. Oh, Jeffrey, you're adorable. He rolled his bloated ass up and hugged her. Tight. Maybe too tight. He was always messed. Up one way or another. But this? This was a new level of screw. The heirloom had taken its pound of flesh. And now? Now he had to get to that mountain of red lava. "Dad," Jeffrey said, standing taller than he felt, "I'm gonna defeat this darkness and free these souls." Daddy sighed. "Son, many have tried. It's impossible." "No," Jeffrey shot back. "You're just scared." Daddy's face got real still. "We don't fight, we hide. That's the only way to survive." Yeah, well, that wasn't gonna work for Jeffrey. 8. Jeffrey gritted his teeth. "I can do it. Tell me. Everything." Daddy watched him a long time, then finally nodded. "All right, boy, I'll help you." The others in the shelter gathered around. Survivors, looking at Jeffrey like he was the last. Can of beans in a damn apocalypse. Daddy sighed. "What's the plan, son?" Jeffrey exhaled. "I don't know." Not exactly reassuring, huh? Alina reached into her purse. That same damn purse she never let go of, even in death. She pulled out a sticky note and smacked it onto Jeffrey's forehead. He yanked it off, frowned. Not funny. It read, "To Jeffrey, my adorable love, save us." And then, light bulb moment, only one way out. One last sacrifice. 9. Jeffrey stood tall. "I know how to beat the darkness and save all of us." Alina narrowed her eyes. "Really?" He nodded. "Greed got us here. Sacrifice will. Set us free." And that, folks, that's the end of Heirloom 2. But don't y'all worry your pretty little heads. Heirloom 3. Sacrifice is coming up next. Later, Gator. Later, Gator.
Dark paranoia. In a small studio apartment on the 4th floor, a cynical young man scratches indifferently at an early birthday present. The man's name is Aaron Newman, a man whom life treats without deference, honor, or success. Waiters bring him cold burgers, and gas station clerks shut doors in his face. On this day before his birthday, he is given a lottery scratch-off that will change not only the way he views the world, but everyone in it. Aaron scratched away at the lottery ticket, scoffing as he did so at the cheapness of such a thoughtless gift. But as the second box read 500,000 on, same as the first, he felt his pulse double and thrum with the intensity of an orchestra of bass. He told himself not to get his hopes up, as the disappointment would only sour after that last scratch. But he couldn't help himself. His palms and forehead began to sweat, and he was acutely aware of his eyes beginning to blur. When the third $500,000 revealed itself, Aaron flew from his seat only for his legs to tremble, forcing him back down to the chair. His face expanded into the appearance of a scream, yet no sound escaped him as his throat tightened. He blinked several times and rubbed his eyes as to confirm to himself that this was not an illusion. And the numbers on the small slip remained the same. Aaron had won the jackpot, and it was all thanks to this apathetic, lazy idea of a birthday present. he decided he wasn't going to cash it right away. He didn't want to give the gifter the satisfaction of knowing they had given him such an exuberant gift. Aaron knew that they would claim credit as if they somehow knew they were giving him a winning ticket, and would expect Aaron to share his money. No, that simply wouldn't do. He'd have to play it cool and act casual with his life as if nothing happened. If the friend would ask about the ticket, he would say he won 20, which didn't feel like much of a lie to Aaron. Anyway, there was 500,000 after all. Aaron gave himself some time in his lonely apartment to collect himself and recenter his nerves. After several moments of balancing his breath and matting away the nervous sweats, he put on his shoes and left to go to the grocery store to have a personal celebration of his newfound, unsuspected success. Once in his car, Aaron drove down Main Street on his way to his town's small grocery store, the Piggly Wiggly, affectionately known as the Pig to locals. Realizing he's still jittery from his winnings, he sets his car on cruise control to keep a consistent, casual speed down the street. As he cruises, a black sedan rolls past a stop sign on his right and pulls in front of him, forcing Aaron to slam on his brakes. The car behind Aaron blares their horn angrily at them and swerves past him, continuing down the road as if this was all Aaron's fault. Aaron slams his fist on the horn as he glares at the black sedan. He can just make out a silhouette on the driver's side window. The shaded head appeared to be staring at him, though for what reason, Aaron could not say. "What the hell?" Aaron yells out at the dark car, which is idled halfway between two streets. Finally, it completed its turn and moderately accelerated down Main. Aaron muttered angrily under his breath as he moved on, eventually turning into the small parking lot of the Pig. The unfortunately meager lot was packed full of vehicles as Aaron weaved up and down the lanes. At last, he found an open space, and as he turned the wheel to park, a faded blue truck rushed in, nearly scraping Aaron's front bumper as it did so. Aaron laid his palm against the horn, blaring his siren. Heads of pedestrians walking amongst the cars swiveled to glower at him, and the driver of the blue truck scowled at him as they raised their middle finger. Aaron's lower lip trembled, and his eyebrow twitched. He eventually gave up and parked along the curb at the front of the store. He saw others do it all the time, and figured just this once he would too. What's the worst that can happen? Now in the store, Aaron goes to the refrigerated meat section. He knows on most days he wouldn't even dream of buying himself a steak, as he could barely live on the salary he made. But the money he had set aside for rent was chump change compared to what's going to be hitting his bank later. Now was the time to splurge. He picks up a decently sized New York strip, then moves towards the beer. As he moved down the aisles among the other shoppers, Aaron noticed that several of them seemed to be looking at him with disdain out of the corner of their eyes. He saw a mother place her hand on the shoulders of her kid, quickly turning them away. Aaron wondered if he had something on his face and offhandedly rubbed at his cheeks. Once in the alcohol section, Aaron inspected the beer selection. At first, he wondered if such an occasion would call for wine, but he didn't really care for the stuff. He settled on a 12 case of Blue Moon. He didn't know if he was going to drink all of them in one night, but wouldn't fault himself if he did. At the checkout, the cashier was loudly and sloppily chewing her gum. She never looked Aaron in the eyes, though did come close when she looked at his nose when she told him his total charge. Aaron couldn't say for sure why, but he felt like this cashier was harshly judging him in her mind. Let her judge. Aaron knew better. Aaron made it back to his apartment with little complication. The steak was overcooked, but the beers, all 12 of them, hit the spot nicely. He had music blasting as he danced awkwardly alone in the studio. With a break in the music, Aaron thought he heard something bang. He paused the music and stood, swaying, as he listened intently for sound. Bang! It was the window. Aaron rushed to the window, threw open the curtains, and looked outside to see 2 kids running across the parking lot in the dark, away from him. "You dipshits!" Aaron yelled. "Come try that again and see what happens." He moved to slam the window shut, and after blinking several times, he realized he never opened it in the first place. Now, with the mood killed, he slumped down on his couch with an aggravated sigh as he sat in desolate silence. Now he thought he could hear whispering, which sounded like they were being spoken just out of view of the corner of his eye. His head swiveled from side to side, yet he saw no one. Though no one could be seen, the whispers and hushed voices continued. They were malevolent, invasive, and bitter. He heard them snicker, as if they were sharing secrets that he wasn't allowed in on. He paced around his apartment room, looking under the couch and behind furniture, even going so far as to lift the pillows on his couch, but could not find the whisperers. An unsettling feeling rose in Aaron's stomach, and he knew it wasn't just the beer. He was reminded of all the rude, hateful people from earlier today. The people who, if they weren't casting malignant glowers, seemed as if they wanted to get him hurt or killed. That's when it hit him. They know. He doesn't know who they are or how they found out, but they know about his uncashed lottery ticket, and they're out to get his money. Fervently, he spun around, brushing off the aggressive quake to his head as he did so, and charged at the small coffee table in front of the couch where he left the scratch-off. He swiped it up and held it, clutched it against his chest. His pallid, sweaty face peered over his shoulder. The whispers were growing louder. No, closer, as he shielded his treasure. He slowly backed away from the table until he broke into a sprint across the room and into the closet. He slammed the door and collapsed on the floor. There he sat for the rest of the night until after an unknowable amount of time had passed, and he finally fell asleep. The next day, his birthday, Aaron's head felt like it was being pounded in with a hammer, wrapped up by thin lemon slices. He stood up from his corner in the closet with an aching back and walked into the main room of his apartment. He looked at his phone and had somehow slept until almost noon and felt grateful he didn't have to go to work that day. He moved to the kitchen and with trembling hands he poured himself a glass of water and gulped it down. He refilled and did this 2 more times before shoving his face in his hands. He usually doesn't remember nights of heavy drinking, but he can recall last night clear as a bell. He knows that people are out to hurt him, possibly even kill him, to get their hands on his money. So he decides he is going to cash in this ticket ASAP and secure his money in the bank. Still wearing yesterday's clothes, he hastily puts on his crumbling sneakers, allowing himself to reverie on the classy new shoes he'll replace these with. He shoved the ticket in his pocket and rushed out the door towards the stairs, neglecting to even lock his door on the way out. Driving down his street, he noticed 2 girls standing on the sidewalk, and he noticed them cover their mouths and laugh. And he swears he saw their eyes dart over at his old car. He scowled at them as he drove past. Further down the road, there was a fallen tree that blocked most of his lane. He didn't see anyone from the other direction, but in light of everything, he had started to get nervous. With sweaty palms, he turns the wheel to move around the fallen tree. No one jumped out to meet him with this inconvenience, but he could see the verdure around him, rustling with ambushers, waiting for the exact right moment. With the stirring vegetation around him, the violent chorus of whispers around him began again. They were louder and somewhat clearer than before. He can make out some of their plans to string him up, beating him senseless. The phrase, "catch him, kill him," echoing in his ears. His eyes are blurring as dime-sized droplets of sweat rush down his forehead and flood his eyes. His hands have gone far from clammy, as now he struggles to maintain a grip on the steering wheel. He uses his forearm to wipe away his eyes, only in time to see a shadow standing in the middle of the road. He screams as he swerves, driving off the side of the road and crashing into a tree. He awoke, unsure of how much time had passed. but saw that the sun had already started to drop. He blinks and squints as the sensation of something cooling slowly runs down the side of his face. He reaches up to touch it, and his hand comes back red. Stumbling out of the car, he hears a woman call out, "He's awake! He's getting out of the car." Aaron turns his head to see a woman and a man standing next to their vehicle, parked on the side of the road. He looks to the tinted back windows and sees more of the shadowy figures, their heads turned to look at him. He gasps and looks back to the woman who cried out. Both she and the man carry twisted expressions of tentative eagerness. He knows they believe their time has come to take him, but he'd sooner go on his own terms before he lets them. He runs back in the direction of home, tearing down the street, lightheaded as he was, unsure of how much blood he'd already lost. He knew he just only had to get back home, and he'd be safe. He didn't see those two girls with their mischievous giggles from earlier, but he knew that they couldn't be far. There are several pairs of running footsteps behind him. He can sense them, though he cannot hear them through the tremendous pounding of his hard-pressed heart. The whispers are shouting now, eager and hungry, their hands reaching towards him with greedy claws. He reached his apartment building and dove into the elevator. He slams his fist onto the button for the 4th floor. As the lift slowly rose, the lights flickered and the walls rattled. Aaron raised his hands and clutched his head as the bitter pounding of his attackers assailed the outside of the elevator. The elevator doors open, and Aaron knows that as soon as he steps over the breach between the lift and the apartment floor, a hand should shoot up and grasp his ankle, keeping him immobile until the doors close and crush him. He jumps over it and runs down the hallway until he sees his apartment. Room's door is left ajar, barely an inch, but open nonetheless. Aaron stood paralyzed. Horror tingled up his body like thousands of avid insects. He knows he has to make a choice. Wait for them to reach him out here, or face them off in there. He likes his chances in there better, if only slightly. He runs into the dark room and slams the door behind him. Immediately, he sees the shadows huddled against the walls. They begin their devious whispering. "Here he is," they say. "Get ready." He can't take it. He thought he could, but he can't take it. Not anymore, and never again. With tears streaming down his face, Aaron cries out, "You'll never take me!" With a blood-curdling scream, he begins to run again. The lights turn on. The trap is about to be sprung, and Aaron Newman jumps at the window and plunges 4 stories down to the concrete below. Emma Newman, mother of Aaron Newton, shrieks. friends and family who had been hiding in the dark to surprise Aaron on his birthday all crowd around the shattered window and look down. No one would ever be able to understand what spurred on this paranoia that led to Aaron's death, as all that was found on his person would be his wallet, his old crumbling sneakers, and a fake lottery ticket given as a gag. But that is perhaps the worst part of paranoia. The unknowing, a dark paranoia. The mind's twisted masterpiece, where shadows dance and conspiracies unite to throw a party that only the troubled can attend. Gloria. They liked to share these idyllic, quiet moments in front of the mirrored dressing table, George combing Georgina's hair. It was something soothing, calming, and therapeutic, a necessary and intimate ritual, an important part of their relationship, which they had been doing together since they couldn't remember, certainly since childhood. In complete silence, never a word spoken, Georgina in a catatonic state of mind, completely immobile, a trance-like state. George slowly, softly, gently glides the brush through her long tresses of hair. This quiet ritual went on for hours, quietly, blissful. They were inside a bubble of tranquility. Gloria watched on, grinning from ear to ear, lolling against the chair, propped up with cushions. Gloria had seen it all. Gloria was a gift, a valuable gift of subterfuge for George, a bribe from his parents to keep him quiet, keep his mouth shut, about the secret that must be kept in the family. No one, absolutely no one must know. You know that, George, don't you? His parents would explain to the innocent ears of George. This is Gloria. You can whisper in her ear if you ever want to talk to someone about it. Okay? Gloria became the listener, the therapist. And then she would pass on the secret information to Georgina. Georgina was the stronger of the two, made of rock. Nothing disturbed or frightened Georgina. That's why George doted on Georgina. He knew he was weak. And she was so strong. She possessed the strength for both of them. Gloria was so pleased to be added to the family and to be an integral part of it. The family was wealthy. The father, a world-renowned specialist surgeon from a wealthy legacy. He was privileged from birth, nannies, boarding school. His pathway in life was constructed and planned before he was born, from generations prior and generations to come. The tried and trusted way. His marriage was arranged, with only a select few who could be considered a match in their world. In those high circles of society, she was perfect, of similar family status. She didn't lose any of her privileges. It was a perfect transition from her maternal family into her family of marriage. She didn't lose any sleep over the matter. Life continued on as normal. Gatherings, parties, friends, It was seamless. When she became pregnant shortly after the marriage, it made the headlines on the celebrity pages. The joyous ink leapt off the gossip pages. She demanded to be fully anesthetized for the birth. Pain was not a word in her personal experience dictionary. She was completely unaware of the conception, totally out of it. She could have given birth to a horse, and was equally unaware she had delivered twins. Gloria was selected as a gift, a treasure for George. She was token of unspeakable secrets, unfulfilled desires. Her appearance with her blonde, braided pigtails, gaudy red lips might have been misconstrued. But George hugged her lovingly from the very first time they met. His parents were incapable of showing affection, demonstrating their love with hugs and kisses, not in the normal sense. It was not accepted in their constrained, unemotional legacy, their upbringing, and it continued in this generational circle of supposedly refined upper-class family and friends. When Gloria arrived, George understood what he was missing. A feeling of unknown nostalgia for simpler circumstances, which he didn't have an inkling about or any comprehension that it existed. Another life, a different life, a life uncomplicated, without the subtle stresses or pressure continuously made by his parents. George always felt vulnerable, awkward, a feeling of an unfinished project in the presence of his parents. On the rare occasions he was allowed into company of his parents' friends, such as cocktail party events or saying farewell at nighttime, George was nervous, uncomfortable. Shyness overcame his speech as he stood dumb and gormlessly in front of the onlooking adults, inspecting George like an alien life form. "Strange boy," they would whisper as he turned his back on leaving the room. George heard the whispers, these overheard comments, like so many others, send him further into his interior cave of solitude and despair. At least George had Gloria to confide in, he always thought, and the thought consoled him. In the eyes of his parents, Gloria's arrival filled a gap. Gloria symbolized a desire for perfection and control over George, which was completely immoral. The family secret must be suppressed at all costs. George was getting older and wiser. Gloria was introduced with the sole intent of keeping the family secret secure. Everybody was aware that George was the weak link in the subterfuge, the conspiracy, the dark secrets of the family. Gloria was the guardian. She was central to it all, and that made her the gatekeeper to the whole incestuous situation. She was the overseer and protector. The only person Gloria confided in was Georgina. Gloria's secret was safe with Georgina. Doing a good job, is he? That's about all he is good for, combing your hair, Gloria said sardonically. Without moving her lips, like a ventriloquist dummy. George is a sweetie, stupid as an ass, but he is my loving brother, and I will always protect him, even from your foul mouth. Georgina replied defensively. He's so stupid. He can't hear us, or he ignores every word. The truth. He's a lame brain. Gloria continued her verbal attack. You are the smart one, the strong one in this family. Georgina, if it wasn't for you, we would still be in the clutches of those dinosaur parents, the molesting evil creeps. Gloria continued. Don't say a bad word about Mummy and Daddy like that. Shut that vile mouth of yours, Gloria. Georgina was getting agitated now, but George continued the slow grooming strokes, undeterred, and it seemed oblivious to the conversation between Georgina and Gloria. The smooth grooming strokes of brush helped Georgina to keep her temper, remain calm. I won't tell anybody what you did. Don't worry. Those abusers of innocent children deserved it. Justice was served. Only you. Georgina had the balls to do it. George doesn't have what it takes. Never did. He always hid behind you, scared of his own shadow. The stupid one. Gloria continued in her negative tone. I watched on for years as they took you to their bed for their evil desires. For years, Daddy wanted control, his evil desires, his manipulation, his family fun. And she, Mummy, followed, a willing assistant, always pickled in her normal, alcohol-fueled state of mind, anesthetized. She was a lush most of the time. Both were heartless, immoral bastards. I was used like a comfort blanket, a rag doll, to make it seem normal. Those twisted monsters whisper in Gloria's ear. Gloria will keep the secrets of the night. Gloria will make any pain go away. Tell Gloria, but don't tell anybody else. Gloria mimicked the parents' words to their sexually molested victim. They deserved what was coming. George dropped the hairbrush and went to Gloria and started hugging her, whispering in her ear. What did he say? Asked Georgina. He says he loves me. And will I forgive him? Will I forgive him for his weaknesses? Gloria replied. Always the same. He's that stupid. He thinks it's his fault. Gloria was angry. Don't be too hard on him. We need him to be his normal, complicit self. We need his continued silence. We need him to keep his mouth shut now, more than at any time. These are dangerous times. No slip-ups. We all need to stick together. Otherwise, there will be trouble for us all, including you, Gloria. Understand? Georgina continued to look into the mirror, but her steely eyes and tightly drawn mouth emphasized the words. It was a threat. Don't you trust me, Georgina, to keep your dirty, obscene family secrets locked away in my head? Gloria said in a challenging, teasing manner. She was goading Georgina. Georgina lifted her right hand. Both hands had been hidden from sight. low between her parted legs during the long grooming process. As she lifted the concealed right hand, one could now see she was holding the blade of the 9-inch carving knife, splashed in crimson blood. The blood stood out a dark, dull shade of red against the shiny silver blade of the knife. Slowly, she raised the blade higher and then held it above her head. She held the pose and slowly turned her upper body and head to face Gloria, unless you are looking for the same Gloria. I would recommend you keep your mouth shut, as you always have. It was the reason you were ingratiated into this family. Your loyalty has kept you alive and your dirty mouth tolerated. Your circumstances can change fatally if you start to change, my dear Gloria. Georgina glared at Gloria threateningly. Now let's clean up the mess. They say no bodies, no crime. Mariner of Innsmouth. I write this now from a hospital bed not far from my hometown. Though I am labeled delirious and force-fed medications whose names I cannot pronounce, do not believe that this testament is anything other than truth. It was 2 days ago, several miles away from the outer shelf reefs from the coast, when I was aboard a sailboat that drifted seemingly aimlessly over the waves. As the setting sun reflected its vibrant hue on the lapping crests, I, the schooner's sole passenger, leaned against a railing as I stared out across the waters. My name is Howard Phillips, and I was out on this solo sailing journey to find a new clarity in life. 3 days before was my father's funeral. My relationship with my father was a perplexing one. I looked up to and admired the man, but felt like I never really knew him too well. I found myself wondering about the conversations that would never be had, the beers never drank together, the lessons and the stories that would never be taught or told. After the funeral, I had expected to feel some clarity and peace, but instead found only distraught and confusion. And I now often wonder about my own life and where it could lead. I was left this small sailboat in the will, and I found it a sign of what to do next, and without a second thought, put everything else on hold, loaded up the boat, and sailed off into the unknown with the belief that I myself could be known. Now, with the currents pulling me ever outward from land, I treated this as an autopilot for the craft as I stared in a yearning way into the waters below. I watched as I saw a small school of fish swim by. Though I could not identify their breed, I mused at the occasional scaled adventurer who would jump from the water away from their brethren as they tasted the open air and observed a whole new alien world. I admired these displays and began to wonder if this was some metaphor from the universe I was meant to see, some natural guidance on my own mission for self-discovery. As I watched the fish surface to dance above the cresting waves, I felt I caught a glimpse of something further ahead in the water. It seemed like two orbs of crimson, as if two eyes were staring at me from below. But when I scanned the waters to better see these supposed eyes, they were nowhere to be found. I supposed whatever bigger fish they belonged to had swum away. Or, more practically, it was a trick of the light of the setting sun. As it distortedly emulated back to me, I shrugged away from the shimmering vision and turned to face the mast. As I did so, I saw a large onyx storm cloud approaching fast in the distance. I rushed to the wheel, yet was too late as the rushing gales moved at a seemingly supernatural speed, enclosing on and whirling the small boat in all directions as my vessel lurched aggressively to and fro. My only option was to cling to the railing for fear of losing myself to the now crushing waves which hurled against the sides of the sailboat like slapping tentacles of a great kraken. The schooner broached and was nearly knocked down. As I was raised into the air, I looked down at the opposite end of the boat and saw that the mast was nearly parallel to the water. I then peered into what I believed to be the murky depths below, except that with a flash of thunder, there appeared to be land not far below me. With that quick blaze of light, I witnessed an unending plain of putrid mud, amassed with the carcasses of decaying fish and horridly foul, less describable things protruding from the sludge. I thought I would feel relief by knowing there was land not far below should I capsize. But instead, an even stronger fear gripped me. A primal fear that whispered in my heart of the unknown horrors hidden beneath the waves. As the unknown, lurking darkness between the spaces of rot and decay beckoned for I to join it in eternity. I witnessed and experienced all of this and more in that split second in the boat's rocking, in that short burst of illumination. But now the ship had leveled out and rode the waves on the merciless winds, whose howls in my ears sounded more like mournful ghosts of all the lost sailors who fell to their watery graves and all the histories of man who came before me. On the horizon, I saw once again those dark crimson orbs from before, though now they rose from the waves instead of hiding beneath them, with churning waters to mark its rise to the surface. The thing slid into view above the dark waters. Those soulless eyes sat as two windows of malice against the face of a towering loathsomeness as it rose to face me. Two monstrous, scaly arms rose to cast in my direction. I turned my face and cowered in a squat huddle against my forlorn vessel, unable to hold my gaze upon the Goliath for fear of losing hold of my sanity. With my eyes squeezed shut and my whole self trembling, I prayed for release from the Leviathan's wake. The sailboat lurched again, this time with such force that I was knocked into the air and hurtled into the water. I felt the unsettling sensation of the sludged mire below, the masses of decay and putrid remains pouring over and surrounding me as I sunk deeper into the concoction of fetid slime and rotted scales which cut deep in my skin. I felt it seep into my nostrils and under my eyelids, and the groping carcasses felt like an incalculable sum of vengeful hands gripping me, pulling me deeper and deeper still into my shallow grave. My consciousness faded, and all went into nothingness around me. That's when I awoke next in a hospital near the coast. I don't know how I escaped, or what became of my father's boat. I only know I was found washed ashore, bruised and littered with abrasions. But I was alive. As I lay on my hospital bed, with no company but the memory of that nightmarish storm, I realized I had found the clarity for which I had set sail, though it was a clarity I would wish on no one, and wish only that we all could remain in our blissful ignorance of the truth. The truth that, as men, our place in this world is that of mere playthings on a board of cosmic proportions for being far beyond mortal comprehension. That the storm that man finds themselves trapped within is at the whims of those who rise from the deep. Not the brightest bulb, the light panned over the coast, gutting the night like a blade through a fish's belly. Emerson, Lee Saw. From experience, he knew the storm would be raging well into the next day. But he'd be safe here. This lighthouse had weathered many storms before this one, and it would weather many more after, too. It had stood here since before he was born, and it would stand long after he was dead, which wouldn't be long now, he reasoned. He raised his metal cup to the windows, which looked out onto the frothing midnight ocean. He offered the night his cheers, then sipped his neat rum. Lightning lit up the abyss, burning his retinas white for one faltering heartbeat. The wind whipped and whooped around the edges of the lighthouse. The rumble of thunder came 3 seconds later, reverberating through his bones. Emerson blinked. The ocean was a cruel mistress sometimes. He knew that more than anybody. He'd spent much of his life aboard fishing vessels, at sea for months. He felt more at home on the open sea than on dry land. That was why he'd taken on the task of lighthouse keeper after retirement. But it seemed that people had lost their respect for the water. Kids rode inflatable beds out on riptides and needed rescuing. Rich yuppies took their boats out in unsafe conditions and needed rescuing. Partying youngsters went for midnight swims whilst inebriated. They drew the attention of the sea beasts, which they then hunted for revenge. And thus, the creatures needed rescuing due to their dwindling numbers. Companies dumped their foul excretions into the blue, so the sea needed rescuing too. Emerson growled and scowled out. The thunder and lightning lashed from the heavens once again. The rain pelted sideways at the window, rattling against the glass. The gale screamed like a dying creature, wounded by a harpoon. Another sound chimed throughout the lighthouse, but this had nothing to do with thunder. He grunted. Somebody had rung the lighthouse's doorbell. Who on earth could that be? The lighthouse clung to a rocky piece of coast that jutted out into the ocean. It was far from any town or village, as Emerson liked it. The only company he usually had came in the form of passing boats and hungry seagulls. Emerson took another swig of rum and set his cup on the table. The wood bore the marks of 1,000,000 condensation rings from the rum mugs of history. He grumbled to himself and passed through the door to the spiral staircase. The doorbell rang again as he descended, with care, the final treacherous steps. He threw the door open to the howling wind. "Yar, I'm coming, I'm coming. Hold your seahorses." On the stoop, 2 kids huddled together, no older than 18. They clung to one another as the wind whipped at them, and the storm soaked them to their bones. "I'm sorry, sir," said the boy, raising his voice over the gale. "But our car broke down, and we're stranded. Can we please hold up with you until the storm has passed?" Emerson was not a people person, but he was also not a heartless monster either. He opened the door to the boy and the girl and guided them up the staircases. "Yar, come in, come in. You're wetter than water. I got some blankies upstairs. Come, let's get you and your lass dry. Me name's Emerson." The boy smiled and offered his hand despite the chill that shook him. "Thanks, man. You're the best, Harry. And this is Skyla." Emerson led them up the winding staircase to the lighthouse's upper room, lit by the beacon. He got some dry towels, stale and mud-eaten, but dry, and put the kettle on for warm tea. You must be pretty frightened. What with you stranded in the dark and the rain, while the sea beats her chest like King Kong. She can be mighty fierce. The boy pulled a face and shook his head. He wrapped a towel around Skyla's shoulders before he tended to himself. "No, inconvenienced and uncomfortable, but not scared." Emerson frowned, but bit his tongue. He guided the youngsters to his couch. It wouldn't be the first time it got wet, and handed them mugs of steeping tea. He sighed and sat down opposite them on his old rickety chair. "And what, if you don't mind me asking, were you two doing out here this late at night?" The boy and the girl blushed. Harry started to say something, but then Skyla interrupted. she shoved her left hand into Emerson's face. A diamond glinted on her ring finger. "Harry proposed to me tonight." As the sun set over the water, staining it red, the color of love. Isn't that romantic? To Emerson, red was the color of blood. Once you'd chummed the waters to lure in the big fish. But he didn't say this. "Yar, it do warm this old sea dog's heart to see young love in bloom. Why, my Bathilda and I, we shared quite a torrid love affair, we did. But she's been sleeping with the fishes for longer'n you've been alive. I still carry her picture in this old locket here, which I wear around me neck at all times. Here, take a look at this beauty, lad, but don't lose your eye for the young lass now, aye." The boy blinked at the picture in the sea air-rusted locket. He did a double take. He seemed to struggle for words. His eyebrows knotted together like a bowline. "Sir, that's a manatee," Emerson recoiled. "You youngsters and your unrealistic Hollywood beauty standards. You shouldn't perpetuate such unhealthy attitudes towards appearances. It only fosters anxiety and insecurity. Yar, you might be young and lovely now, but see how pretty you'll look in 60 years. Let's see how you are once the sea's done rusted your lungs and your legs been took by an orca and a great white working in cahoots." The girl reached over and rapped a knuckle on his shin. A smirk touched the corners of her lips. "But sir, both your legs are still attached," Emerson yelped and tucked his legs back under his chair. "I jumped into the blood-stained brine, I did. Wrestled me legs back from the bellies of the respective beasts at the same time. Fought them both off, using nothing but me bare hands. I sewed them back on, I did, using nothing but a bit of old gut fishing line. I cleaned the wounds by spitting on 'em, then patched myself back up. It hurt for a while, but it didn't affect me well-trained balance on the deck. Yar, at sea you needs good sea legs, especially whilst Poseidon's throwing you about like a dusty old rug that your mama's trying to clean." The kids exchanged a glance and snickered. "That didn't happen, did it, sir?" asked the boy. "You're having us on." Emerson bit his lip. He knew how to get through to these young'uns, to teach them the proper respect they ought to have for the ocean. Emerson had seen waves taller than buildings and fish bigger than elephants. He'd seen currents sweep sailors to their doom in seconds. Emerson had seen men sink into the abyss as waves pummeled them like a boxer in a match with no referee to ring the bell. These kids had been on dry land, but the ocean was hungry. She could reach out and snatch you from the shore if she wanted. They had gotten lucky. The midnight tide hadn't pulled them out to sea whilst the boy popped the question. Emerson got to his feet and slipped out the door to the spiral staircase. "I have something to show yer. You wait right here, my lovelies." Confused whispers came from behind him. Outside, the storm continued to rage. The wind screamed and the rain lashed. The ocean roared and threw itself against the lighthouse's base. The foundations shuddered. Emerson found the switch, covered in warning stickers, and flicked it. The lighthouse went dark. A small shriek came from above. He ascended in shadow, grinning at the panicked voices. He barged through the door and clicked the torch on. He illuminated his haggard face from below and bellowed. It was a dark and stormy night. Harry and Skyla screamed and clung to each other, their faces pulled in a rictus of terror in the torch's beam. "What the hell?" began the boy, but Emerson cut him off. The ocean was raging. The night was black. You couldn't tell where the sky ended and the water began. And we all knew that she, the creature, was out there hunting us. The hunters had become the hunted. A foghorn shattered the tension, deafening them all. Harry jumped up, knocking his chair over backwards. Skyla shrieked and threw her hands up to her face. A flick of a fish's tail later, the lighthouse shook around them. A great, wrenching metallic crunch rocked the world. Ice froze his limbs. He broke through the paralysis and staggered to the window. He shined his flashlight onto the rocks below. "Good God," whispered Emerson. The jagged stones had acted like a shark's teeth, puncturing the ship's hull. It leaned like a drunken sailor, 45 degrees to the side. On top, seamen clung to the rails, whilst others tried to scramble about the rain-wet deck. Baffled shouts punctured the storm's wailing. Boxes of cargo crashed into the surf. Some sailors tossed life rings into the brine to rescue men overboard. Emerson whimpered. This lighthouse had not had a single accident for almost 100 years. And now, in one swift hour, he'd caused a disaster. He should never have exaggerated the truth to impress these kids. The ocean was scary and beautiful enough as it was. It didn't need cheapening with manufactured myths and legends, but he'd tried to scare them into respecting the fierce hand of nature. Tried and failed. They thought he was an old coot who'd messed up on the job, and they wouldn't exactly be wrong now, would they? He'd forgotten the very lesson he'd been trying to teach. His shoulders slumped. "Yar, I'm not the brightest bulb, methinks." Frayed edges, Monday, 6:50 p.m. Sitting hunched over the scratched wooden surface of the desk in the corner of his room. Hideo Nakamura froze mid-brush stroke and stiffened. The hairs on the back of his neck rising up in response to the sudden, inexplicable certainty that he was being watched. He was home alone, had been for days. The house was deathly quiet, and the night was still. He'd been buried so deep in silent concentration while he practiced his kanji that he could have heard a moth flap its wings or a spider scuttle across the floor. Nobody, not a living, breathing soul, could have come down the hall, slid open his door, or entered his room without him noticing. Not a living, breathing soul. And yet, now he spun on his stool, expecting to find one, his breath caught in his throat as he came around and rose, arm up in readiness of defense. Calligraphy brush brandished like a weapon. Nobody was there, but the sensation of being watched didn't leave him. His room was small, just 8 tatami mats in size, and from where he stood to the wardrobe ahead was only a couple of paces. To his right, next to his desk, and flush against the wall, was a thin, uncomfortable mattress which lay, without a base, flat on the floor. 3 of the bedroom walls, those to his left and right, and the one that held a curtained window behind him, were made of brick and plywood. The one ahead, which separated his room from the corridor, was a 2-panel traditional shoji, a latticework of bamboo in a wooden frame, covered with sheets of translucent paper. The outermost panel was on a track so it could slide, but it was closed now, the way he'd left it after entering the room. A bare bulb dangled from the ceiling, illuminating the room sufficiently. Apart from a few boxes full of textbooks and a rack on which sat some pairs of shoes, there was nothing in the room behind which anything that shouldn't have been there could have hidden. The only place any such thing could have been concealed was inside the wardrobe, which was built into the wall and sealed by another sliding door. It was this door that captured Hideo's attention. A second after he stood, or more specifically, it was the almond-shaped tear in the center-most paper panel, and the blackness beyond that his eyes came to rest on. The tear had been made a few days prior, when his feet got caught in the blankets as he hopped out of bed, causing him to stumble and plunge his thumb through the delicate paper. Ordinarily, this would have been a cause of concern for Hideo. But with his father away, there had been no need to panic. What his father didn't know couldn't turn him into that wrecking ball of rage Hideo had become all too familiar with since the passing of his mother. So it was a blessing he wasn't there to discover the damage. As minor as it was, it would have pushed him over the edge, the way every slight inconvenience seemed to these days. His father's unpredictability had been growing steadily these past months, along with his dependency on alcohol, and Hideo could no longer anticipate when or where he might snap. They didn't speak much anymore, not even by text, and he had no idea how long this latest business trip might last. It might be days like the last one, or weeks like the one the time before. Whatever the case, he really did need to find time to repaper that shoji. For all he knew, his father could return that very evening, and that would mean trouble and bruises. If only he could fit it in around studying for his exams, practicing for the upcoming calligraphy contest his school had put him forward for, and training for the baseball league finals. All would be good, or at least as good as it could be. While walking on eggshells, an unexpected flicker of motion in the darkness behind the tear made Hideo jump, and he staggered, bumping into his seat and knocking it over. He didn't know what he'd seen, but he didn't hesitate in dropping his brush and snatching up the wooden stool in panic. Turning back towards the wardrobe, he half expected to find the door sliding open, or something hideous wriggling out through the hole. Instead, he found there was no longer darkness behind the tear, and he thought he could see the sleeve of his jacket. He creased his brow and took a step closer, squinting to peer through the hole. Yes, that was it. His white and blue baseball jacket, hanging where it always hung, in silence. And with that realization, he no longer felt he was being watched. Just my imagination, he thought, lowering the stool to the floor and catching his breath. Studying too hard, too much time alone in this empty house. Whatever he'd felt, whatever he'd thought, it was just a con of the senses. His mind playing tricks, telling him it was time to take a break. Deciding to do just that, Hideo picked up his brush, put it back on the desk, then made his way out of the room, heading down the hall to a lonely kitchen. Tuesday, 5:45 a.m., an hour before his phone alarm blared, he came alert, woken not by hunger pangs, nightmares about his father, or fears of being late for an exam, but by the horrible, goosebump-raising sensation of once again being intensely watched. In the dark, he fumbled on the floor for his phone, snatched it up when he found it, and jabbed it out into the room. The screen lit up with the press of a button, and he scanned it around, searching for anything out of the ordinary. His surroundings were illuminated only slightly, but it was enough for him to see that all looked normal. His door was shut, his curtains drawn, the light bulb dangled darkly. His desk, his stool, his boxes of books, and his shoes. Everything exactly as it should be. His hand stopped moving when the glow from his phone found the tear in the closed wardrobe. Shoji. There was a darkness beyond that was darker than that of his room and seemed to throb. Panic seized his chest, and he jumped up, casting off his blankets and the textbooks he'd fallen asleep with, and stepping forward, free hand searching for a cord above his head, tugging it when he found it to ignite the bulb. "Is somebody there?" he asked, dropping his phone on the mattress and advancing in his shorts towards the wardrobe. "Don't be stupid," he thought. "Of course nobody's there. How could anyone be there? It's just the wardrobe." He was at the door in a second, reaching out with one hand, slipping his fingers around the edge of the panel's wooden frame to slide it open. The light from the bulb rushed in, proving at once what he already knew, that there was nothing to discover within except dangling clothes, the smell of mothballs, and towers of folded blankets on the floor. The darkness, if it had been there to begin with, was gone now. The door had been opened, and Hideo stared in bewilderment. The wardrobe was void of evil, peeping entities, and he no longer sensed any presence. "What is wrong with me?" he wondered, wiping sweat from his brow as he slid the door shut. "Why am I so on edge?" Telling himself it had to be exam stress, performance anxiety, exhaustion, looming deadlines, fear of his father, grief over the loss of his mother, or some kind of mind-warping, paranoia-inducing combination of it all. He slid the door shut and returned to his mattress, switching off the light as he passed beneath it and crawling under the blankets to get more sleep. Wednesday, 7:58 p.m. The second he entered the room, sweaty in his mud-stained baseball uniform, aluminium bat resting lightly on one shoulder, he could sense the presence watching him again. Stopped in his tracks in mid-yawn, he spun to glare at the tear in the brittle square of paper. His ceiling light was on as he'd left it, and though earlier it had shone into the hole, allowing him a glimpse of the clothes within, all he could see there now was darkness. His face flushed as his eyes probed the black as pitch nothing, which seemed to be staring at him. His blood ran cold, his heart thumped loud, a lump stuck firmly in his throat. "Who's there?" he said, voice trembling, fully convinced now someone was hiding in the wardrobe. "Whoever you are, you better come out. I've a baseball bat, and I'll use it." Not a sound came back in response. Not a whisper. Not a giggle. Not a growl. If it was a ghost, or a demon, or something otherworldly, haunting him and spying from beyond, it didn't play its tricks to established rules. If it was human, or a thing of flesh and bone, it didn't care. A jot it had been rumbled. Maybe it was because he'd just come home from training, and his body was pumped full of adrenaline. Maybe it was because the baseball bat felt powerful in his hands. Maybe it was just that he was sick of being weak and quaking before others like a baby. Whatever it was, Hideo forced down the lump in his throat and strode to the door, slamming it back and stepping through, brandishing his weapon in both hands. As before, there was nothing out of the ordinary to be found, and nothing to be seen other than undisturbed clothes, on metal hangers, and neatly folded blankets on the floor. He jabbed his bat forward into his shirts, slid them aside, checked every inch of the back wall. There was nothing. There was no one. It was empty. "This doesn't make sense," Hideo said, lowering his bat. He was inside the wardrobe fully, in the space between threshold and clothes. He decided he should examine the torn paper panel from this side, in case there was something he was missing. So he took hold of the sliding door and pulled it shut. Almost at once, a chill seemed to descend, and he felt like he'd entered a vacuum. It could only have been his imagination again, brought on by the uneasiness of the moment. So he forced the notion from his mind and told himself it wasn't as cold as he thought. "Is it you?" he asked, craning his neck to examine the frayed edges of the tear. "Are you mad because I ripped you? Are you trying to drive me insane?" There was no logical thought behind his words. A shoji panel couldn't feel anger, nor did it have the ability to haunt or stare, regardless of how old it might have been. And old it was, which was clear from its brittleness and discoloration. Who knew how many people had slept in this room and used this wardrobe? Who knew what this door might have seen had it only had eyes? Logic didn't seem to factor into the current situation, so Hideo thought nothing of it when it occurred to him the tear did look like an eye, and he suddenly had the urge to peer out through it. Slowly, carefully, he moved his face closer and positioned himself right behind the hole. Squeezing one eye shut, he squinted to see out through it, only to be punched in the gut by the shock of seeing someone on his stool, hunched over his desk, apparently writing. Terrified, Hideo spat the air from his lungs and fell back, dropping to crouch amongst the blankets. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to process what he'd seen. What the hell was that? Starting to question his sanity, and clutching his bat in both hands, he straightened back up and returned his eye to the hole. He had to have been mistaken. He couldn't have seen what he thought. It was impossible as the fact it was now somehow dark inside the room. Someone had switched off the light. The person who'd been sitting on his stool? He couldn't see much, but he could tell right away that person was gone. He could make out shapes in the darkness, like the stool and the desk and the mattress lying flat against the wall. There was something else, too. A large mound on the bed. And just as he realized what that was, a light blossomed into life. A rectangular light he knew came from a phone. He was frozen, captivated by what he saw, unable to look away. He watched the rectangle of light rise and bob around the room like a ghostly lantern. He knew, before it happened, the ceiling light was going to come on, like he knew who'd be beneath it when it did. "Is somebody there?" he saw himself ask, before jerking his head away and shuffling back, burying himself deep in shirts and jackets. "No, no, no, no!" he panicked, pressing himself back against the wall and clutching the bat to his chest. Eyes shut. He thought he heard the familiar swooshing sound of the shoji door opening. Impossible, he thought, squeezing his eyes so tightly shut he felt that they would burst. This isn't real. This isn't real. It can't be. Swoosh. Again, then bang, and his eyes jerked open. Had the door opened and closed? Had someone peered inside? No, I'm imagining it. This can't be happening. It can't. The first time he'd felt like he was being watched, he'd been sitting at his desk drawing kanji. The second time he'd felt it, he'd been lying in bed, disturbed from a restless slumber. The third time had been just a few minutes before, when he'd entered his room and sensed the presence. And what had he done then, as completely immersed in this nightmare as he was? Hideo didn't believe the door would open again until it did. Nor did he believe a version of himself, a doppelganger, a demon, would step across the threshold and enter the wardrobe. But it did. It was dressed like him. It carried a baseball bat like him. It was dirty from sliding in mud like him. But it wasn't him, because he was there, shrinking back into the corner, watching it prod its bat into the clothes to sweep them aside. Steel hangers screeched along a tarnished metal rail, like witches shrieking, and the noise cut right to his core. Just a minute ago, he'd done the same thing, examining the back of the wardrobe and finding nothing. This one wouldn't come away so empty-handed. This one was going to find him. And with that thought, that fear, that panic-inducing, life-threatening realization, Hideo acted. The scream surged from the depths of his being, and he pushed himself up and lunged forward, swinging his bat as he did, striking the shocked-looking doppelganger square in the face and knocking it out of the wardrobe. He didn't stop. The adrenaline coursing through his veins was electrifying. It made his body burn and flooded him with rage. This was a fight for survival, a battle to retain his place in the world, to protect his identity. And he couldn't let this phony Hideo hurt him, and so he hit it as it fell to the floor, again and again on the head, pounding it into submission, pummeling it brutally until the feeble, desperate cries it made fell silent, and its spasming, copycat limbs lay deathly still. He stood over it then, panting, wheezing, sweat dripping off his brow, blood dripping off his bat. He stared at the demon's battered face, found he was unable to focus on it, didn't want to. Instead, he examined the blood splatter that decorated the tatami mats around it. The patterns looked like kanji characters, painted in thick, red ink. "Hideo, I'm home. Come say hello to your father." The shout that seemed to come from the kitchen at the bottom of the hall startled him, and he jerked his head to stare at the bedroom door. His father was home? Since when? He hadn't heard him enter. Had he been there all along? If so, what had he heard? And what would he say about the torn paper shoji, let alone the monster on the floor, wincing, afraid to see the mess he'd made, and the demon's caved-in face? He looked back down. There was nothing there. No doppelganger, no splatter, no kanji characters sketched in crimson blood. "Hideo, get your ass out here, boy!" Confused, panicked, Hideo caught a glimpse of his reflection in the shiny, polished surface of his bat, and shuddered when he didn't recognize it. It was his face. Of that, there was no doubt. But something was different. Something had changed. Something seemed missing from his eyes. That's when he noticed the bat wasn't covered in blood, but he knew that it could be. "I'm hungry, Hideo. Come and cook something. Don't make me go in and get you. There's no food in the house," he muttered, too quiet to be heard by anyone other than himself. "There's nothing in this house at all. Hideo!" He knew what it was now. Hideo! He knew what was missing from his eyes. Hideo! It was fear, and worry, and sorrow, grief, and loneliness, and hate. All of it gone, as if it had drained out of him, leaving just the one thing he had left: anger. "Coming!" he shouted back. Then he went out of his room to greet his father. I became insane, with long intervals of horrible sanity. Edgar Allan Poe. Just deserts. It is impossible to resist a hitchhiker on a road to nowhere. And that was exactly what my cousin Shane's wedding to Raven the following morning was going to be. It was strange that we all gathered to wish them well, when none of us would be there in 2 years, when the ineluctable breach of the sacrament was ratified by the divorce judge, after Shane's degenerate, pathological gambling resulted in the foreclosure of Raven's overpriced bungalow-style home in Boulder City, which she would naively agree to mortgage to the hilt to bail him out, setting up the bad beat betrayal she'd been waiting for from the day they met. That is the thing about El Sombreron. He ties his 4 mules to his inamorato's post, while he woos from the threshold with sweet songs strummed on a silver guitar, plucking notes of promise, woven in plaited spirals, like Guatemalan braids. But once the affair begins, he leaves the stomach empty. Madre de Dios. At length, his black dogs howl their dismal mourning at the snow moon, which searches in vain, like a celestial spotlight, for what is left of the shriveled Chiquispeo. Still, it is said that the old man never forgets the ones he has loved. I must apologize. My mind is prone to wandering. It is part of my condition. I wonder how often Pablo Tak felt the same way, baptizing savages in the frontier who were more than likely bent for a hell of their own making. How many does El Sombreron visit to pay them their wages? Sabrina, the Jamaican flight attendant, with the perfectly symmetrical face and the caramel complexion, scolded Carl, who sat right next to me, saying, "Stay seated while the seat belt sign is illuminated. Don't make me tell you again." The seat belt light had been illuminated since the plane touched off, and tropical storm Tomas caught us in its clutches, sending us in an interminable loop between Tortilla Flats and Scottsdale. Carl muttered something under his whiskey-smelling breath. Sitting down, Carl released a low, rumbling cough that rattled in his chest like a cracked carburetor. We were off to a famous start. I didn't know how long I'd had a demon, but El Sombreron was in the back row with his broad-brimmed, high-crowned black hat angled down while he napped. I was safe for now. I could hear him whispering, "Stefan, you can't hide in your books forever. Sooner or later, you will have to face me. Face your undoing. You will have to face what you have done." While I wondered when El Sombreron would make his move, I stroked my necklace with the coat of arms pendant, striped blue and red, with an eagle at the crest. I kept reading from Alta, California, a book of essays about Spanish and Mexican settlers in the Spanish borderlands. I was reading about the life of Pablo Tak, a Luiseno Indian who, despite dying at age 19, was a prolific writer and missionary whose extensive writings were the only surviving accounts of the Luiseno language and culture, and one of the most studied reports of missionary life on the frontier. I had a second book in my bag, Memories of Life at a Mission, a biographical account written by Pablo Tak himself. Carl had to get up so he could get something out of his bag in the overheads. When he sat back down, he had a stack of medical reports in hand. The header of his papers read, "Dr. Carl Kellogg, MD, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center." And I spotted a reference to someone named Sal. Carl said, "I have an appointment to keep. I'll be damned if I am going to miss it. The next thing they're going to tell us is the flight is diverted to goddamn Phoenix." On cue, the pilot came back over the PA to inform us that the flight was, indeed, being grounded in Phoenix for the night, and that the airline would arrange for replacement transportation. But given the lateness of the hour, it would have to be the following day. Those that did not wish to sleep in the airport would have a room comped nearby. I was relieved when they first told me about the glioblastoma. I'd gone directly to St. Peter's Episcopal Church and entered the confessional, and I'd told Father Darby how I'd been driving home from the history conference in Ithaca a few years back, after too many celebratory toasts. and quite a few tequila shooters, from the minibar to boot. I'd only wanted to sleep in my bed that night. I'd told Father Darby how I'd heard a thud and a crack of my windshield. The blue-jeaned body of a teenage girl hung in the rear view, perfectly cradled in the refracted lamplight. How I'd kept on driving. How many Hail Marys to fix that one. Sabrina offered me a beverage, which I sternly declined, and I asked her softly, "Do you see a man about 6 rows back with a black-brimmed hat?" She turned, dutifully, and then looked down at me with wide eyes. No, I do not, sir," she said. "Is everything okay?" I nodded. I was safe for now. As we began our descent into Phoenix, Carl became apoplectic. He stowed his hands in a rigid, set position on his knees and trained his eyes forward at Sabrina, like she was his jailer. And he stood wrongly accused. "I have an important appointment in the morning in San Diego. I can't be late. I just can't." Carl said all of this more to himself than anything. Sabrina paid no attention. I put my hand on Carl's shoulder and said, "We will figure this out together. We are going to the same place. So, you are proposing we drive around the storm, through the night to San Diego? Are you nuts? You want to make that appointment or not?" I asked. And so, we tossed our luggage in the back of a silver Toyota Tacoma 4-door and hit the road. "I saw your paperwork. So, you are a doctor? A surgeon?" Carl said. "What about you?" "I am a history teacher, college level, up at Cornell. My research relates to sojourners and missionaries, all manner of settlers and vagabonds, anyone uprooted from their home and stranded in a foreign land. Aren't they fascinating, I suppose? That book you were reading, it was about one of those, Pablo Tack." "Who?" "A young missionary boy who grew up in the Mission San Luis Rey." "And what makes him so special?" "Pablo Tack? Well, for one, he had a motto. Siempre adelante y nunca para atrás. It was more than a saying. It became his epitaph. He died young. I don't know it for a certainty, but I imagine Pablo Tack didn't live long enough to make a mistake he'd regret for the rest of his life. Sounds foolish. He's lucky he made it that long, out on the frontier." Carl's mind seemed trained to detect pathology in everything. "You know, Pablo made it to Rome to study for the priesthood, then returned to the frontier. He left behind quite a body of work, made a record of nearly his whole life, day by day. Imagine covering that much ground by age 19. And how did he die, if I might ask? Smallpox. There you go. The boy devotes himself to God, and boom, clapping his hands for effect. He's snuffed out like a match in between God's bloodthirsty fingers. I think it was a gift that God allowed him to finish his mission early. Besides, if Pablo Tack could get that far by 19, then there's hope for a couple of middle-aged codgers like us, don't you think? I said things like this. Hope as if I still dared to wish for an unearned pardon. I wondered if all sojourners are really on the run, each sure, in their own way, that redemption could only be granted, if at all, a long way off from the place where the crime happened. I guess fugitives are always prisoners of the truth. All I see is a promising man stomped under heel by a dictator. So there's no point to suffering. I'm an oncologist. You cure the sick. Cure? Oh no. I specialize in pancreatic cancer. The 5-year survival rate is 12%. My nickname among my colleagues is the Grim Reaper. So, no, I wouldn't exactly say that I cure the sick. More like I chaperone them to death's doorstep. I'm a butcher with dull blades, just an order taker at a meat counter. My patients' diagnoses are like those number dispenser tags in a supermarket. You know those red machines with the Garvey pull-off tags? I call their numbers and deliver the meat to the morgue. Remind me to never call you for a consult, I said. And we both laughed. What is that pendant you were playing with on the plane? Oh, this. It is the DeSantis family crest. A gift from my father. I was raised out by the Mission San Luis Rey by my foster family. I consider myself a DeSantis, but my birth name is Stefan Daskalov. That is a foreign-sounding name if I ever heard one. Where are you from, originally? I was born in Bulgaria in the year of the Jubilee. And what was that like, growing up in Eastern Europe? I wouldn't know. My mother and I left when I was 8. Was there something going on there you had to get away from? You could say that. We were Turks, which is not such a good thing if you were living in Bulgaria. There was a national campaign to rename all Turks and erase our ethnicity. My father was an enthusiast for the resistance, and the communist jackboots came and pulled him from our home and took him to a labor camp on the island of Belen on the Danube. He died there that same year, but we never even learned how. And what happened to your mother? After that, my mother and I emigrated to Turkey to escape persecution. She put me on a boat headed to California, promising she'd follow after. She couldn't ever save up enough for her ticket, and I never saw her again. Some years ago, I traveled back to Turkey and found the town where she was buried. It is strange. It seems like another world, one that I barely knew. That reminded me that I had another thing to say Hail Marys for. Jesus, that is one hell of a way to start out in life. You know, there was nothing written on her tombstone. Out behind the old house, a real road to nowhere. Traveling west along I-8, we drank tall coffees and looked out on the vast desert, like two teens taking a road trip. Rather than two terminally ill hypocrites, the massive orange dunes propagated to infinity, hugging dappled purple shadows for warmth. Their peaks glistening in the penetrating spears of mulish moonlight smuggled past the veil. Great towering thunderheads bellowed and filled the sky like totipotent corpuscles injected with black-gray swirls of ink and mercury. Stefan took a wrong turn before Yuma. We finally stopped at a rickety bridge, the McFall Bridge. The bridge cut a path over the Gila River toward the coastal mountains. The GPS glitched and told us to cross, but the sign read, "Bridge closed." Graffiti on the guardrails read, "Bridge to nowhere. We'll have to backtrack and find another way through," I said. "I guess we've come to the end of the road," Carl said, belting out an uncharacteristic laugh, then resuming his rumbling coughs, the gasps and chokes of a stalling engine. "For your sake? I hope not." "Look up there," I said, pointing at two figures walking across the McFall Bridge toward us, carrying canvas sacks. They emerged from the hazy expanse, blown in with the petrichor, which flavored the charged and static air. The purple thunderheads pulsed with bursts of voltage, branching like the paradoxical mimics of reaching tree limbs and searing flares. The bushes and cactuses accented the barren landscape with the resilient wit of life persisting on vapors, ruffled in a fanning and pitiless wind, trending to death. There was a sudden knock. They were two young boys. I rolled down my window. "I'm Bobo, and this is my friend Amix. We are headed to California. It's been a long journey, and the storm is coming in fast." "Oh, shame," said Carl. "Do you think we could tag along until you get to Yuma? We can help you navigate in the desert. We know the way." I looked over at Carl, who nodded his approval. "Jump in," I said. "The safest way is to backtrack to I-8 and take that all the way down. We are in a hurry." "Is there a faster route?" Carl asked. "Well, you could take the Camino del Diablo, but I wouldn't recommend it." "What is that in English?" "The Devil's Highway." Bobo nodded. Carl let out another hearty laugh. He turned to me and said, "How could we refuse?" And that was when I knew that Carl wasn't long for this world, and guessed that his appointment was not for a special case, but for palliative care. Over my shoulder, I saw that El Sombreron was sitting between the boys. His head hung expectantly over his silver guitar. Death was alive in the cadaverous pallor of Carl's complexion. The color ran out of him like a rich, milky cheddar cheese that starts a bright orange but whitens and hardens so quickly when left out on the cutting board. Carl had already begun to decompose. I wondered if Carl had cats. If you die alone, a dog won't eat you. A hungry cat is another thing altogether. Bobo was a skeletal man, not more than 5'3". His khaki Anouks shirt hugged his body, making him appear in the dark like a human shadow. "I see you are reading Pablo Tak, Memories of Life at a Mission." "Yes, I am," I said, surprised. "Have you read it?" "Ah, yes. What a heartbreaker. Wait until you get to the last chapter, where he is called back to Rome for ordination." Bobo tossed his sack over his shoulder and began walking back down the Devil's Highway. "I thought he died awaiting ordination," I called after, but Bobo was already gone. I had one of the last collector editions sold at auction at San Luis Rey. The thing is, As I watched Bobo and Amix disappear into the dust of the desert, it occurred to me that this book had been out of print for decades, since before these boys were born. Now, it was just Carl, me, and El Sombreron on the Camino del Diablo, in the dead of night, on our way to separate destinations, but sharing one fate. After driving for hours in what must have been circles, the warning light for refilling the gas tank came on, squeaking over and over at regular intervals, like a diseased heart incapable of variation. And we only had one reserve gas can left in the trunk. "Carl," I said, "let's camp out here for the night and save our last fuel can for the daylight. I don't want to get lost." Carl was looking ghastly and pallid. "I have s'mores ingredients. I was saving them for the night after the wedding. But I say we build a proper fire and enjoy them tonight." We gathered sticks, and I used leader fluid, charcoal, and pieces of paper to help get the fire going. Even with all of that, I was barely successful out there in the dark. How did men build fires like these for thousands of years in the hard-hearted blackness? I pulled the sleeping bags out of the trunk, grabbed little baggies with graham crackers, marshmallows, and chocolate squares. Carl livened up, and the two of us chatted late into the night before falling asleep in our sleeping bags. At the edge of the fire, fingers sticky and bellies full. The night grew cold. Before the first rays of efflorescent dawn emerged from the undercroft of Gehenna, I arose, a diaphanous shroud. Carl rose with me. We both looked at the smoldering fire, the fulgent, crackling embers, the hoary, thinning smoke. Two bodies in sleeping bags, cold and stiff in the first light, looking at one another. Then, at the horizon, I noticed that the cool desert morning felt warm and radiant on my skin. It shimmered as it touched my arms, like the glint of light off a lizard's scales. "Are we almost to the mission?" I asked Carl. Carl barely had time to shrug his shoulders before we were interrupted. El Sombreron strutted in a waddling gait down the road ahead, leading his train of mules into our camp. His spurs jingled, and each rock gave its distinct harmony to the singing rowels. The mules whuffled and snorted the bass line, and El Sombreron whistled while chewing on a stick of straw plucked from the breaching rays of the new sun. The brim of his broad-rimmed black sombrero forever hid his visage. And he came to a stop just before us. "Do you see him?" I asked. Carl nodded. But when his strength failed him at length, El Sombreron said, and I instinctively continued. He met a pilgrim shadow. With that, El Sombreron gave a little bow and continued. Over his heart, a shadow fell. "But which way is the mission?" I asked. "Ride, boldly ride," the shade replied. "To where?" "Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow." "An emerald deal." "This is unbelievable," Francis exclaimed as he held my self-portrait in his hands. It looks just like you. Frankie Cullens is my best friend, and he holds in his hands what I hoped to be the beginning of my illustrious career as an artist. I smile at him, a humble, gentle smile, as I contain the bubbling anxiety within the pit of my stomach. Do you really think so? I asked, in what I hoped to be a tone that indicated only mild curiosity, and not that of a child seeking validation. Frankie looked from the painting and up to me with blazed excitement in his eyes. This is no joke, Mort. What I have in my hands here is pure, uncut talent. He lightly shook the painting in his hands as he said so, but abruptly stopped when he realized he was doing so, as if worrying he could ruin it. As a matter of fact, Frankie continued, I'd like to post this on your page and talk about the process of how you painted this, if you're all right with that. Honestly, I was taken aback by this offer. What, like, you want to be my manager or something? I sarcastically asked him this as I chuckled, but Frankie's face remained sincere. His response to me felt so genuine, so lacking in the raillery I expected, that it took me some time to register it. Why not? I've always believed in your work, Mort, even when no one else did. But with this, he trailed off as he looked back down at my painting. Finally, he continued, this was seriously all freehand? I nodded. Yes, it really was. But, Frankie, would you really want to be my manager? I don't even know what that job would involve. He waved his hand dismissively at me and smirked. Exactly why you need one. Let me handle all the details. But this, you just need to worry about making more of this. His smirk had grown into a wide grin as his eyes welled with moisturized droplets. I was stupefied at my friend's eagerness to want to work for me after seeing this latest piece of my work. I knew, of course, that this painting and all others that followed would be different. But to have this sort of hypnotic effect was entirely unexpected. Yeah, okay, I hesitantly agreed. Go ahead and post it, then. Frankie's eyes widened in a somewhat disturbing display of ecstasy. Perfect. I'll get on that right now, and you do what you gotta do for your process, and you get another painting out. ASAP. I promise you, Mort, this is going to be huge. Before I could even open my mouth to respond, Frankie had already darted out of my studio, which was just my room in our shared apartment, and into his room across the hall as I heard his door slam behind him in an eager swing. I stood silently amidst the canvases on easels, which all displayed different degrees of blankness to what had the appearance of being worked on for several minutes of brush strokes. Then, forgotten, they stood around the room in a way that formed a labyrinth to the bed, one which only I knew the right way through. I looked at all of these unfinished and unbegun paintings and vowed they would not stay this way for long. things were different now. I got most of the way through a new painting I was working on. I believe I will title Green Singers, when I noticed I was at it for almost 10 hours straight. No food, water, or bathroom breaks. I got myself into bed. I lay there for an unknowable amount of time as sleep eluded me, and I found myself thinking back to a conversation I'd had with an alluring stranger. It was last week, on a Thursday, when I was at my favorite art exhibition in town, which thankfully had a small coffee shop near the entrance. As I sipped at my caramel macchiato, I was scrolling through the reactions, or lack thereof, one of my paintings received. It had been posted for approximately 72 hours and had garnered 7 likes, while most of the comments were uninspired at best and rude at worst. One of them even said something along the lines of, "This is motel art at best. You look too scared to put any real expression into your work. Don't quit your day job for this. Hope this helps." What the hell was that even supposed to mean? I dropped my phone on the table in such a frustrated way that my coffee trembled and nearly spilled. Not that I cared. I threw my hands over my face and exhaled in an admittedly overdramatic, defeated way. There I buried my face as I gathered myself when I heard someone sit down in the chair across from me. I looked up, expecting to see Frankie. Instead, it was a man whom I had never seen before. I recall little from his physical appearance, but I remember he was wearing an expensive-looking suit, and his eyes, those piercing emerald green eyes, with an intense and age sheen, the likes of which I had never seen before. "Can I help you?" I asked, making sure the irritated tone, hinting at "please go away," was noticeable in my inflection. The stranger gave me a smile that was warm and comforting, and I felt my disappointment in myself and the world melt away from my chest. I know it's weird to say, but I instantly felt comfortable with this man here. "I'm a fan of your work," he said to me. His voice was velvety and sweet. "I wanted to meet you in person, but I have to say, there is room for improvement." Of course, I thought to myself, another critic who thinks they can tell me how to paint. "Oh yeah?" I said, with the irritation back in force. I took another sip from my coffee. "Oh, yes," the man said. "But that's not a bad thing. Every great artist knows there is always room for improvement. It's the knowledge that one would never achieve perfection, yet their pursuit for it is endless." I rolled my eyes at him, though I guessed he did have a point. "Maybe you're right. And I'm guessing you have the solution for that?" This was obviously a rhetorical question, yet the man kept his gaze locked in mine, and he said, "It so happens I do." What would you say if your paintings would become the epitome of perfection? That through your great works, your name would be immortalized, etched into the framework of history alongside Monet, Van Gogh, Michelangelo, and so many others. I laughed dryly at him. For that, I paused, peering searchingly into my cup of coffee, now at room temperature. For that, I would give everything. That statement came out of me so much more sincerely than I would have expected from myself. Realizing this, I laughed at myself, raised my coffee, and gulped the rest of it down. I was feeling this odd sense of anticipation I could not explain. Like the feeling a kid at a theme park gets when they are near the end of the line for a ride on one of the attractions. The man with the green eyes raised an eyebrow at me as he said, "While I admire the enthusiasm, I wouldn't ask you for everything. If I were to perfect your art, I would ask for very little in return. In fact, now it was my turn to raise my eyebrows, but in a more incredulous, disbelieving sort of way. Wait, are you serious right now?" The man said nothing. He only kept that cool, soothing smile. I pressed on. "So, you could make me one of the greatest artists of all time, and you would want what? My soul? That's what this is, right? Some low-budget Twilight Zone episode where you grant me my biggest dream, and all I give in return is my soul?" Now the man leaned forward in his chair, closer to me. I could smell him now. It was a scent that felt so refreshing, as it ignited nostalgic feelings for events of my life that I could not recall ever happening. It soon dawned on me that the feelings of nostalgia his scent gave me were not like smelling freshly mowed grass and remembering a magical summer from childhood. This was a sense of longing for events in my life I had not yet lived. "No, you don't have to worry about that," he said in a reserved timbre. "Despite what certain media would tell you, I don't barter for souls." I considered this, then asked him, "Well, then what do you want from me?" "Two things," he said. "If I immortalize you and your art, I need you to paint something for me. I will tell you what at a time of my choosing. Second, I need you, Jack Mortimer, to say 5 little words to me to endorse our contract." I was practically vibrating in my seat now, with anticipation, as if a colony of butterflies had birthed within me all at once. He didn't need to tell me what those 5 words were that he needed, as I could feel them on the tip of my tongue, ready to burst. I stood up and eagerly reached my hand out to shake his. He did the same. I fervently told him what he needed to hear. "I see you, Mr. Green." 3 months had passed since I painted that self-portrait, which I allowed Frankie to keep. He keeps it proudly hung in his new office, where he works around the clock to get me new exhibits for my paintings. Green Singers had been a phenomenal success, and there had been 12 others so far after. He even got me a spot to talk on the late night show, which, to be fair, didn't seem too hard, as they had reached out to him and practically begged for me to make an appearance. But what I found most astonishing from this whole experience was that the scenes I painted seemed to come to life not long after they were finished. When I painted my hometown with a clearly visible view of the Andromeda Galaxy in the night sky, the next evening, the miraculous anomaly was reported across the states, which led astronomers stumped as to how it had suddenly become so bright to make it so visible to the naked eye. I painted snow in Southern California, and the next day there was a blanket of almost 12 inches in Los Angeles. That's what made it exceptionally convenient when, out of the millions of supporters and admirers across the globe, I discovered one truly bitter, ignorant critic. His name was Elijah Quill, better known by his Reddit username as ELQ69, a truly tasteless name to choose for one such as him. It didn't take long for me to find a picture of him, as people like him are always so self-absorbed that their photos are aplenty and public to pair with their highly opinionated views. But Eli should have thought to be more careful what he does with photos of himself on the internet. After I had memorized his face, his body type, and what style he wears, it was almost too easy to paint his liking as I saw fit. Elijah Quill, in my depiction, was seen in a dark alley somewhere, having been beaten to death. The folds inside his pocket turned out to indicate he had been robbed after the fact. I kept this painting to myself, of course, but couldn't resist the urge to Google the news in the city I found that he lived in. There he was, the egotistical bastard, making the top headline. Good for him. A few days after the oh-so-tragic passing of LQ69, Frankie came to see me. We no longer lived in that small apartment together, as I had found a nice condo in the city. I buzzed him in, and he came in with that adoring, eager grin. That suck-up smile was starting to get on my nerves. "Hey, Mort," he said cheerfully. My God, he's practically skipping towards me, I thought exasperatedly. "Listen, I got a new opening for you downtown, and if you're okay with it, I'm thinking somewhere around 5 we can..." I held a hand to stop him, which he did instantly. "Hang on a second, Frankie. There's something I got to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He cocked his head to the side as he asked me, "Sure, what's up?" I looked him into those weirdly adoring eyes as he waited. "I'm going to have to let you go, Frankie." The look Frankie gave me was as if I had just kicked a puppy across the room. "Well, what?" he stammered. I blinked and said, "You're fired, Frankie. I'm sorry, but the truth is, I don't need you anymore. You can expect your last check in the mail." Frankie backed away, his legs trembling. His eyes darted about the room in disbelief. I can't believe this. I thought we was friends, Mort. Tears had already begun to roll down his face. We were, but let's face it, Frankie, I've outgrown you. I'm sure you understand. Frankie's face turned beet red as he exclaimed, "You can't do this. We were a team." I watched him begin to storm away and back to my front door. As he yelled over his shoulder, "You'll regret this, Mort. It was both of us, together." The door slammed. Well, that was dramatic, I said to no one. Cha. That night, I awoke with a start. I was having some horrendous dreams, though I can't remember the details. Now awake, I found that I was standing in my new studio, painting. The unfinished work before me showed horrid images that were difficult for the human mind to comprehend. Hulking beasts of otherworldly proportions as they crowded and swarmed an unnamed city. People stacked haphazardly on pyres as they burned in a green, hellish inferno. The more I looked into this accursed piece, the more I felt my sanity quickly escaping me. I thought I heard voices chanting around me in some long-forgotten tongue, whispering names I had not heard nor possessed the power to pronounce. Summoning every ounce of my mental fortitude and strength, I managed to tear my gaze from the canvas as I knocked it to the floor. That's when I saw behind it was another easel, and displayed on it was my painting of the murdered Elijah Quill, whose disproportionately crooked neck had upturned his face to look directly into my eyes. That one should not be there, I thought incredulously. It was hidden away. Come now, Mr. Mortimer. Such a beauty should never be kept hidden. That voice behind me. It was his voice. I spun around and saw the man, this Mr. Green, smiling at me. "You," I said, as I pointed an accusing finger at him, "you're what made me paint that nightmare, aren't you?" Mr. Green looked at the unfinished painting on the floor, then back to me. "That was our deal, Mort. One painting of my choosing, when I wish it. It would be in your best interest to uphold your end and finish it." "No," I muttered. "No, I will not bring that hell into being. The deal is off. You can take away this power. I've already gotten enough out of it anyway." Mr. Green sighed at me, but coolly said, "I would have to agree. Thanks to your admirable work with Mr. Quill." I was taken aback by this. "What do you mean by that?" I demanded. Mr. Green's smile vanished. He sneered at me as he explained, "I told you when we first met that I do not barter for souls. I don't have to, as your kind are always so eager to place it in the palm of my hand. For just the smallest taste of power, and ultimate adoration, you burned yourself on the very pyre that you built. My jaw dropped open. No. But what could I say? What could I do? I go now, Mr. Green continued with a returning smile, now sinister as a dealer in a rigged game of poker, to prepare a place for you. And with those parting words, he faded from view, until all that was left were two floating orbs of emerald glaring at me, until they, too, were gone, alone again. In the darkness of my condo, I began to see visions, things that were not of my home, of a similar layout to the one I used to live in the apartment with Frankie. On a table, I saw a mostly empty bottle of Jack Daniels. I turned and saw on the edge of the bed was Frankie. He still lived in that tiny apartment, and here he was, drunk beyond all reason, with tears flooding his face and snot oozing from a sniffling nose. I saw in his hands he held that self-portrait, the first of my paintings after that deal. "Damn you, Mort," he whimpered. He produced a pocket lighter and set the flame to the bottom corner of my self-portrait. "No, Frankie, wait!" I screamed at him, but he didn't appear to hear me. The flames ate up the canvas as they crept from the torso to the painted face. "Damn you to hell, Mort," Frankie began to sob. The images of Frankie's room vanished, and my own dwellings had returned. "This is unbelievable," I cried as the last image of Frankie disappeared. Standing here in the dark of my own vanity, I felt the effects of Frankie's actions with that damned painting. The fire started at my feet and quickly licked and raced up my legs, soon engulfing my body. I yelled, swatting at the flames, yet the inferno continued to spread all around me. And only me as I raised my hands to my face and screamed. The Roomba Facebook Marketplace. Roomba 600E. Details. Condition. Used like new. Description. Slightly used. Comes with all accessories and 2 chargers. Price. Negotiable. Need gone. ASAP. Christine kicked off her heels as soon as she walked through the door. The French baguette, peeking out of the brown paper bag in her hands, wobbled precariously as Sir Lancelot wove his way beneath her feet, while she attempted to place the groceries on the bench. Lancelot was a Persian crossed with a rag doll, and the combination equated to hair. Lots of it. Christine scanned her critical eye over the apartment. Clumps of fur wafted everywhere. She loved little Lancy immensely, but she didn't love his hair. She sighed as she opened the hall cupboard to get out her cumbersome Hoover, a relic that had belonged to her mother and had been passed down to her. It was time for its second workout of the day, and she just hoped the ancient beast was up for the task. The high-pitched groan was ominous, as was the smell of electrical burning that began moments after she had switched the machine on. Christine immediately disconnected the power and resigned herself to her fate. It was time to purchase a new vacuum. Unfortunately, her finances were still limited, and so she opened her phone to browse Facebook Marketplace. Surely she would find a deal there. It wasn't as if she was fussy. Anything that would work would be better than trying to sweep up the unsweepable. The price caught her eye first. Then the picture. A Roomba. A robot vacuum. Imagine coming home each day to a house that was freshly cleaned. No cat hair, no dust. The more she thought about it, the more Christine became convinced that she could not possibly live one more day without the services of her own personal Roomba robot. A quick series of messages back and forth, and soon Christine found herself the proud new owner of a second-hand robot vacuum. Be careful with the settings. It's a bit of a beast if you're not keeping an eye on it, the previous owner had advised her. She'd smiled and nodded, figuring that the internet would have all the instruction manuals and safety precautions listed somewhere. Once she plugged in the charging dock, Christine Googled the instructions and set the operating time to run twice a day while she was at work. With a happy sigh, she fed Lancey his dinner, reheated leftovers for herself, and went to bed. She was jolted awake at 4 in the morning by a soft mechanical whirring and solid, repeated thumps that shook her bed. Lancey, startled awake from his sleeping position at the foot of her bed, hissed violently as he landed on her chest, claws extended. It took her a bleary moment to connect the dots, but she finally realized she'd set the timer incorrectly, setting the machine to work at 4 a.m. instead of 4 p.m. It seemed to be stuck, trying to vacuum under her bed, catching itself repeatedly on the leg, and unable to navigate its way out of the situation. The bright lights, like little eyes, glinted with frustration, which echoed her own emotional state. It really was way too early for her to remember the settings, so she stumbled out of bed as she tried to whack the off button on the machine. It finally powered down with a petulant wheeze, the lights blinking off sadly. Placating Lancey took much longer, as his fur was literally on end. But after much stroking and coaxing, the cat settled back at the foot of the bed, curled up in a cat ball, and purred himself to sleep. The following morning, after feeding Lancey his breakfast, Christine studied the online manual closely as she absently munched on toast and sipped her coffee. Carefully following the instructions, she set the timer, double-checking the AM/PM setting. From his sunny position on the windowsill, Lancey hissed and arched his back. A familiar whirring caught her attention, and a soft bumping nudged her toes. When she looked beneath the table, the Roomba was carefully vacuuming the crumbs she had spilled. "Odd," she muttered. "I haven't turned you on yet. Must be a saved setting from the previous owner." She didn't have time to look for the clear all settings section of the manual, but resolved to look into it after work. Once again, Christine was rudely awoken at 4 a.m. by the repeated thumping of the machine and the yowling hiss of the cat as Lancy landed claws first on her chest. "For the love of," she muttered, tossing her blanket aside to deal with the rogue machine. This time, the off button seemed to stick, and she was unable to power it down. "Well, if you won't switch off, you may as well do your job out here." Christine shoved the machine into the living room and firmly closed her bedroom door. Lancy would be all right for a couple of hours. She'd let him out for a kitty litter break as soon as the sun was up. The morning brought chaos. Christine's living room was spotlessly clean, immaculate even, but she couldn't find her shoes. She usually kicked them off by the front door, but they were nowhere to be seen. She rummaged under the sofa and coffee tables, just in case she had kicked them off in the living room, and then crawled into the dust bunnies under her bed on the off chance they were there, but to no avail. Finally, she had to do a quick change of outfit so that she could wear the more casual loafers in the back of her wardrobe, and rushed out of the door, late for work. When she came home, Christine kicked off her shoes near the door as she juggled the bags of groceries she'd purchased after work. The light on the Roomba's dock was flashing, indicating that the dustbin needed emptying, so she dumped the heavier bags on the floor to attend to the task. When she lifted the lid, a mystery was solved. There, in shreds, were her lovely leather, high-heeled shoes. They'd obviously been caught by the Roomba overnight and had become a casualty of the cleaning machine. "At least there's a reasonable explanation," she sighed as she took the small dustbin to empty into the outside bin, happy that she wasn't losing her mind, but not happy about the cost of replacing her favorite shoes. When she returned, she cried out in alarm. The Roomba was stuck on the paper shopping bag, and its whirring brushes had opened a hole in the washing powder box. Fine white ponder was flying everywhere. "Oh, for the love of," she cried in exasperation as she extracted the paper bag from the maw of the machine. She set it to clean up the white laundry powder while she packed the rest of the groceries away. When she turned from the pantry, after putting the last item on the shelf, she nearly tripped over the Roomba that had silently moved its cleaning path right behind her, its lights blinking up at her like two besotted eyes. With a gasp, she stopped herself from falling just in time by grabbing the fridge door with one hand and banging her other forearm hard on the kitchen bench. She cried out in pain, and she wrenched the freezer open to get an ice pack. Pressing the ice to her smarting injury, she trudged into the living room to rest and assess the damage. Hopefully, she hadn't broken anything. The skin was still intact, but she'd have a huge bruise tomorrow. No doubt. Lancey curled up next to her and purred as she scratched his head with one hand. She'd just relaxed enough for the shock and pain to wear off when the cat hissed and leapt from the couch. A soft whirring approached, and the Roomba trundled in, bumping gently into Christine's feet. "Goodness, you're more trouble than you're worth," she told the machine as she stood up to make herself some dinner and pour Lancey some kitty kibble into his food bowl. Christine shut her bedroom door that evening, determined to get a full night's sleep and not be woken by a marauding machine at an ungodly hour. She had to lock Lancey out, much to his disgust, as she didn't want him to lose access to his litter tray and have an accident in her bedroom. Her sleep was undisturbed, and she woke refreshed and ready to begin the day. In the kitchen, she noticed that Lancey had not finished his dinner last night. The bowl was still full of kibble. "Lancey? Here, kitty, kitty," she called as she opened a can of cat food. He was not around, sulking, most likely because she didn't let him sleep on her bed. "I'll leave it here for you then." She emptied the old kibble and replaced it with some tuna. As Christine ate her toast, she felt the whirring of little brushes bumping into her toes. So she lifted her feet to allow the Roomba to pass under the table on its morning cleanup rotation. She'd long since given up the idea of setting the machine to work when she was not home. It seemed to have a mind of its own and cleaned at all sorts of random times during the day. She didn't think much of the little trail of red on her foot when she put her loafers on, just brushed the smudge away. "Bye, Lancey," she called as she left for work. The cat was still sulking. Perhaps he'd be more cuddly when she got home. When she returned, her apartment smelt like rotting fish, and she gagged as she opened the door. The cat food was still sitting in the bowl uneaten, and flies were buzzing around the dish, along with a trail of ants. Quickly, Christine disposed of the food. "Lancey?" she crooned gently, and then again, more urgently. Perhaps the cat was unwell. The Roomba's light indicated a full dust bin, and Christine noticed the trail of ants marching up the side. She opened the lid and screamed. Blood and fur and pulverized viscera filled the bin. She ran to the bathroom and heaved, retching up the contents of her stomach as tears ran down her face. From behind her, there was a whirring sound, and the Roomba looked at her with its bright lights unblinking. Facebook Marketplace. Roomba 600E. Details. Condition. Used like new. Description. Slightly used. Comes with all accessories and 2 chargers. Price negotiable. Need gone ASAP. These blades are made for wounding. The knife whispered to him in its innocent, mouse-like voice. Tatum. Blythe gritted his teeth and squeezed the blade's handle in a white-knuckle grip. Moisture threatened to spill over from his eyes. "No," he said. "Not now. Not tonight. Stop it. But the knife, as usual, paid him no mind. Half hidden in the reflection along the blade, the little face grinned. It giggled. Its high-pitched tones recalled the voices of untold Disney characters. Murder, Tatum, murder, killing, death, slayings, stabby, stabby, stab, stab. Tears spilling from his eyes. He began to chop the onion like a madman. Meanwhile, the blade giggled and chattered about everything it could do. Stabbing and slicing Tatum, punctured lungs, impaled hearts, slashed open bellies, sweet, juicy, beautiful blood, Tatum. Like a fountain, Tatum. Like a goddamn fountain. Tatum chopped, diced, and sliced the onion into oblivion. The recipe had asked for onion cut into cubes, and he had gone overboard. Behind Tatum, the toilet flushed. The sounds of hand washing came, and then the bathroom lock clicked open. Luella Fairchild, indeed as fair as her family name declared, stepped out. "How's the meal prep going?" she asked. He chucked the knife into the sink with a metallic clang. He grabbed a different blade from the magnetic knife rack. "Great," he said, his voice cracking. "Oh, let me handle that," Lou said. Before he could stop her, she'd picked up the knife and turned the tap on. What could he say? "Don't touch that. The blade is sentient and maniacal." He'd be the one who sounded insane. She'd leave and never look back. Hell, she'd tell her friends to steer clear of him, and they'd inform their friends. He'd be alone forever. So, he watched her with the knife. He waited for a tiny voice to delight in obscenities. Luella pre-washed the knife under the tap. With the sponge, she wiped the blade clean until it glinted. And then, she placed the knife into the dishwasher. Meanwhile, the knife said nothing. She caught his gaze as she bent down to the dishwasher. A small smile touched the corner of her lips, but there was a flash of confusion, like light on a blade, in her eyes. "What?" he laughed. The sound was wild and unhinged. "Nothing. Hey, would you pass me the wine? I want to caramelize these onions." "It's on the dining room table." The caution in her face softened, and her smile became more relaxed. "Sure thing. You sure do know your way around a kitchen, Tatum. I can't wait to try it." "Be right back," he sighed, and scrolled on his phone through the rest of the recipe. His battery was running low, so he plugged it into the charger cable he always kept on the counter. So, the next step is to... Half a second after Lou had left the room, the fresh knife in his hands chuckled. "Murder, Tatum. Beautiful, cold-blooded murder. Stab her in the back, Tatum, in the back. Get her in the kidneys and watch her bleed out. Gorgeous killings, Tatum. Slash, stab and slice. No, not this one too. Could it be that it wasn't the knives at all? That it was him? That he was the one who was insane? Tatum took the knife and threw it at the wall. He screamed, not thinking about his present company. No! The blade thudded into the wall with the accuracy of a circus knife thrower. It punctured the wall, pointy end first, and remained there, wobbling from the force. Behind him, Luella screamed and jumped, dropping the wine. The bottle hit the kitchen tiles and shattered. Glass fragments and splashes of wasted wine flew in all directions. That was that then. The gig was up. Lou knew he was nuts. Tatum turned to look at her. He stood there, panting, eyes wide, hair wild, madness written all over his face. His shoulders slumped. I'm sorry, Lou. I'm so sorry. You need to leave. Hands held to her collarbone. Lou stepped around the glass and approached him. She reached for him, shaking. Will you please tell me what's going on, Tatum? Her voice hitched. I can help. You need to trust me and open up. It's not good to keep this sort of thing trapped deep inside. He stammered. I can't. Tatum, leave. Go on. Get out. Go. Now! A heartbeat passed between them. Lou's eyes couldn't grow any wider. The world held its breath. The knives said nothing. And then the woman burst into tears and bolted from his apartment. Tatum sobbed. What was wrong with him? Had he lost it? Were the men in white coats coming to take him away? Coming to take him away? Tatum slammed the door shut. He took a step, tripped over the open dishwasher, and fell backwards. He landed on the knife Luella had cleaned and placed upright. The blade sliced through his back and penetrated out through his chest in a gout of blood. The wet metal glinted. Yay! Murder! Squeaked a tiny voice. Tatum gasped as the cold hands of death squeezed his heart. He reached up for his phone on the counter. His fingers crawled like a blind spider until Tatum found it. Lou! He choked, blood dribbling from his mouth. Lou? The charger cable, still plugged in, caught around something and yanked. The knife rack toppled from the kitchen counter, spilling the knives into the air. The glinting blades twirled and plunged like Olympic divers going for gold. They punctured him and left him pin-cushioned. A choir of voices rose in ecstasy. Yay! He should have told Luella what was going on. He'd been too scared to speak about this madness, fearing it would drive her away. But he'd driven her away anyway, and it had resulted in his death. He shouldn't have kept it all bottled inside. Now it was too late. Tears trickled from his eyes and intermingled with the blood spilling from his mouth as he faded away. The knives wriggled inside him, giggling about death and murder.